Hello everyone and welcome to our Skull 2022 ecosystem event, Moments of Change, Clarity, Cohesion and Confidence for your organisation. This session is part of Skull World Forum's Ecosystem Day and is wholly curated and hosted by Creative Métier. I'm Jessica Stewart and I lead our Inspiring Leaders and Impactful Organisations work at Creative Métier. I'm hosting our interactive panel conversation for the next 60 minutes. Today, we are sharing the themes uncovered through our evaluation of coaching provided to Agora partner organisations to navigate the COVID pandemic, giving you a peek behind the scenes as to how coaching surfaces solutions and enables action for social impact, and inviting you to experience the coaching space and unlock your own moment of organisational or leadership change. And I'm joined by my colleague, Ellie Guest, who leads our coaching work. And we will be joined by our panellists, Cecilia Foxworthy from Agora Partnerships and Anita Ramachandran from MicroMentor. And they will share the moments of change they experienced during their coaching and the social impact of that.
And during the session, we'll invite you to experience these moments of change for yourself. So we'll ask a series of coaching questions designed to unlock clarity, cohesion, and confidence for yourself. So take a moment now to bring to mind either a complex ambition that you'd like to achieve or a challenging situation that you're currently navigating. And it might be helpful to have a pen and paper or something to capture your thoughts on as we move through those questions. And a quick note on how we'll work over the session. You have access to the chat where you can make comments. And if you have any specific questions that you'd like us to answer, then please use the Q&A function so it doesn't get lost in the chat along the way. Let's get started then.
Great, thank you, Ellie. So just to set the context here, in 2020, our Gideas Foundation chose to invest in coaching for 41 CEOs and senior leaders across 14 of their partners globally, with the objective of leveraging Creative Métier's business-focused coaching approach to support them to positively navigate the pandemic. We've now evaluated that support and discovered 3 key dimensions of impact associated with the coaching, which we are really excited to share with you today. But first, let's get to know our panelists. Anita, over to you.
Hello, Jessica. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, good evening and good morning to everybody. It's really nice to be here. I am Anita Ramachandran. I'm the Executive Director of MicroMentor. MicroMentor is a social enterprise that connects micro entrepreneurs, small and medium enterprise business owners around the world with access to mentoring. Our goal is to democratize access to social capital through business mentoring, and we do that through an online platform. We're present in our entrepreneurs are coming from nearly 200 countries over the past 10 plus years. Our community has had about 180,000 entrepreneurs, maybe about 65,000 mentors. I lose count on a daily basis, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. And our focus is to ensure that these entrepreneurs, through mentoring, have access to resources, networks. They're able to grow their skills, their confidence, and ultimately see economic returns in their business. It's really great to be here.
Thank you. And so around the time that we started the coaching work together, what was happening with MicroMentor?
I stepped into MicroMentor as the executive director, 6 years ago now, but I've been with the organization for a while. We sit within Mercy Corps as a social enterprise that's been incubating within Mercy Corps. At that time, when this was in 2020, that we started the coaching with you, Creative Métier, and Jessica, you specifically. MicroMentor was already on like this path of growth. Every year it's sort of hit a new juncture. And in 2020, we'd been on this 2-year sort of growth path and already looking to see, what sort of strategic direction we'd need to take it, key staff we'd want to hire. And then COVID happened. So it sort of put all of this that we were thinking about, added kindling to that, to what needed to happen, but in some ways really kind of slowed us down as well. It like sped up a lot of partnerships, and we had so much to do and people were grappling with how to handle COVID, work from home, stress. But we felt this immense pressure to, and responsibility, honestly, to show up for entrepreneurs who were having to close their doors around the world in such a rapid rate. So it was sort of a moment of change for us as a company, for me as a leader, to sort of think about what this next phase was going to look like. But it was definitely, the backdrop of it all was the pandemic that had hit and sort of changed course for us.
Sure. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. And Cecilia, it'd be lovely to hear a little from you about yourself and Agora Partnerships.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jessica and Ellie, for inviting me to the panel. So Agora Partnerships is a nonprofit organization. We've been operating exclusively in the Latin American Caribbean region for the last 17 years. And what we do at our core is that we support small and growing businesses to become more economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable, as well as more productive as they integrate into higher value chains across the region. So our sort of a North Star is inclusive prosperity across Latin America, and we achieve that goal via the support that we provide to these small and growing businesses. And we are the capacity builders ourselves. We do direct support to entrepreneurs, but along with that, we always in our projects of entrepreneurial support also always include market linkages and access to finance. And those two sort of components are via partnerships. So we partner with a wide variety of different actors in the private sector, in the public sector, corporations, e-commerce platforms, fintechs, investors, banks, et cetera, to really ensure that we're creating sort of win-win scenarios, and also support systems that sort of last throughout time. So once we have to leave as capacity builders, that there's still a system of support in order to increase sales, increase sustainability, and increase integration into these value chains. And again, it's across Latin America. Our main sort of geographical focus within Latin America is Mexico, Central America, and the Andean region, but we do work across the entire region.
Fantastic, thank you. And so what was happening with Agora Partnerships at the time that we started our work together?
Well, similarly, but not at the same scale, we were going through a sort of a transition period, and we had been talking, so actually, let me back up for a second. We started working specifically with Glynis at Creative Métier, I think it was 2020 as well. At the time, I was in fact part of the leadership team, but at the time I was the chief programs officer. So the reason that we had started the coaching essentially was to get sort of the leadership team working together in a more sort of cohesive fashion. And this was sort of, it was during the time of COVID, but we hadn't yet been acutely impacted, but one could see it coming. So that was sort of the purpose at the beginning, was to have sort of a collective small group leadership coaching sessions. That, however, quickly changed because then we were, in fact, like so many other organizations, not just entrepreneurs, but nonprofits, private sector actors, everybody, was obviously affected during the pandemic for positive and negative reasons. But we were one of those that really saw, we were in fact negatively affected, in all honesty and transparency. I don't think there's anything super surprising about that. But so we had to make a bunch of difficult decisions, right, as an organization. And part of that was, for example, closing our office in Chile. Part of that was actually entering into the CEO transition that we had in fact been talking about for the last 2 years, but it was sort of the moment it was sort of the perfect storm that sort of forced us to make that decision. And so I transitioned to the CEO role in a moment of challenging times for the organization. And not just because of COVID. I mean, let's be very honest here. I mean, we had been impacted by multiple climate disasters in the region as well, socio-political unrest. So COVID was actually just one of the many components that we were facing, that was greatly affecting our organization. And it just sort of became clear that, as I transitioned into the role, as our team was experimenting these different changes, as we needed to enter into a new sort of strategic period of the organization's life, that we needed some kind of support, external support. And so that's when we sat down with Glynis and just had an open, honest conversation and sort of decided, okay, well, actually, the time that the coaching that Creative Métier is dedicating to our organization should actually be dedicated, sounds a little selfish, but to me, as I transitioned to this role in a time of extreme challenge. So without getting into the weeds, we confronted lots of different interesting sort of hurdles that we have now surpassed. And I mean, without getting ahead of myself, I do think that coaching was a great help in surmounting those hurdles.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you. And welcome, Anita and Cecilia and Ellie, to the panel, and welcome to all of our guests as well alongside. So let's now just take a brief look at some of our evaluation themes. So when we looked across the partners, and actually you've started to hear it already, how there are different challenges just between Anita and Cecilia. So when we looked across the partners that we worked with over this period, we found that they'd faced many and varied challenges. However, they tended towards two groupings. So firstly, we had partners whose business and service delivery models were fundamentally challenged by the pandemic, perhaps those with a largely in-person delivery model initially. And those partners found themselves needing to rapidly digitize their services to clients, but also navigate in the internal challenges of the people, the systems and the processes that came along with the pandemic. And then secondly, we saw a group of partners who saw rapid growth in demand for their services. So predominantly those who were already operating a digital delivery model to some extent. And these teams were faced with the need to deliver rapid scale. But alongside those very same challenges that were being faced by the first group in terms of their internal people, systems and processes. And so we noticed that across all the partners, yes, the pandemic was posing new challenges, but actually, Cecilia, as you kind of referenced, and Anita as well, actually there were perhaps challenges ongoing prior. And what we really saw very clearly was that it turned up the heat underneath any challenges that were already being faced. So whether it was succession, scale, team culture, leadership or systems, the pressures of the pandemic accelerated this need for change and innovation, and at the same time challenged or exposed the mechanisms that were in place to deliver that. So those are our kind of key groupings of the challenges that we observed across the CEOs and senior leaders. And it was an absolute privilege to speak to some of our coachees to record the Coaching Impact podcast series. And from these conversations, three clear themes emerged, despite the different contexts of the coachees. So firstly, that the coaching supported leaders to gain clarity about the direction that they should take, about priorities during these moments of change. And secondly, the individual and team coaching supported cohesion and improved communication across newly virtual or challenged teams. And then thirdly, that the coaching built confidence amongst leaders and their teams to make these critical decisions in a timely way and to take those steps that needed to be taken to secure the organisation and its impact. And it's these three themes that we'd really like to dig into today with some lovely kind of practical examples and to hear the experiences of Anita and Cecilia in relation to those. So let's get our panel discussion started. Cecilia, if I may, I'd love to come to you first. So I'd be really keen to hear your response to the first of our evaluation themes. So how did your coaching support you to gain clarity for yourself and your organisation, and what impact did that have?
Yeah, I think for us, this was actually the principal piece, because we were, excuse me, still residual COVID for me too. So I think that because we were in such a period of transition and transformation, as a matter of fact, this was where I think that we got the most out of the coaching experience. And I remember very acutely, I was one of those people that couldn't go home because of COVID for about a year. I couldn't actually go back home. So I was just sort of floating around. And I remember one of the first coaching sessions I had with Glynis. I'm very into Post-its and sort of workshopping my thoughts. But looked like a sort of a crazy person, but my wall was just covered in Post-its with all of the different sort of potential directions we could go in and things that we needed to explore, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember like turning my computer around for Glynis to see this, and it was just like, oh, okay, let's like sort of drill down into this and figure out, where the most impact can be created. And a lot of it, of course, it was my team and myself figuring that out. But what the coaching, I think, did there, and I've repeated this many times directly to Glynis and also to you, Jessica, I think in the podcast series. But it was about having the right questions asked to me as a leader to be able to reflect. I am generally a critical thinker. I do ask myself those questions, but it is super helpful to have an external person. And sometimes there's just simple questions, but that you sort of take for granted that you haven't, we're all sort of led by certain biases or experiences, or hypotheses. And it's sort of about the coaching sort of forced me to also make those hypotheses more concrete and determine how can I either validate or invalidate those hypotheses in order to be able to construct the new strategy going forward. And let me be really clear here too. It wasn't me, it was the team. So we co-created this strategy, but the coaching sessions helped me narrow down the focus enough so that it was manageable for the team to then determine which direction we should go in. Because, one can get very overwhelmed if you have, if the world is your entire oyster, then it's actually not helpful, right? So I think that was super helpful. Just in fact, the questions being asked of me in our coaching sessions really helped me gain clarity in terms of narrowing down. And then also in terms of what kinds of questions do I need to be asking my team so that they can then take it a step further. So it was sort of like a little bit of a trickle effect. Although I was the one receiving the coaching individually, I was then able to sort of implement some of that with my team so that we could really nail down that strategy. And I think it's super important. We've all, as an organization, as many other organizations, we've always had sort of a direction, but we've never put on paper an actual 3-year strategy with objectives, with a plan behind it. And so I think this whole process, it was not only just about clarity in terms of our conversations we were having, the vision we had, the type of impact we thought we could make or we think that we can make, but it was also about really putting it down very narrowly, not narrowly, but very concretely, I should say, on paper so that we can act against that. And process. And we're still in this process. It's on paper, but we still continue to move towards greater clarity as we continue to implement things. And again, I think it was a large part that just those questions, and also actually very importantly, I would say, forcing yourself to set aside the time to reflect on this with another person. And as leaders, I think, especially in times of challenge, you're just sort of running. And you're just trying to do as much as you possibly can. We're working so many hours, and it's very difficult to just stop, even for an hour a month. It's very difficult to just stop and say, all right, let me really reflect on this. And I think just holding those spaces and time in your calendar even, and in your head, was super, super helpful.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much, Cecilia. And so I'm wondering, Anita, how about you in terms of clarity? How did the coaching support you and your team in relation to this theme?
As I was hearing Cecilia speak, so many of the things that she was saying resonated as something that we experienced as well during that time. While what prompted the coaching sessions itself was what I stated earlier, the backdrop of our own growth and COVID, it really was so much happening. Like, we started getting new partners, and we had to spin up programs very quickly. MicroMentor works with corporate partners and employee engagement programs where they can come in as volunteer mentors. So companies and employees were really wanting to give back and do something. Like, people were virtual now at home. So there was suddenly that rush of interest in doing these things, which meant, we had to pause our strategy, which also offers lack of clarity for the team. It's like, okay, what are we doing? Are we doing COVID support, or are we going to move on to see how our strategy is evolving? So it sort of threw like, took a whole bunch of things in a bag and and tossed it together. And like Cecilia is saying, I was just working relentless hours, and everybody was at this crazy pace. And at the same time, people are worried, folks were worried about COVID and whatnot. What it, just high level themes, what it offered to me. And immediately in the process itself, while we were going through the coaching, it offered me clarity that one, that this was a natural part of growth. COVID or not, we were at a point where things needed to change. The number of people on the MicroMentor team had grown. The scale and scope of our partnerships had grown. We work with governments and large organizations. MicroMentor had expanded into 2 new regions in Somalia and in the MENA region with an Arabic platform. So growth was happening, and we threw COVID in the mix, but growth was happening, and that was something I think both you and Glynis had reiterated, which was really important for me to step back and say, yes, this is a function of growth, and that I had to actually redefine my job almost, and bring together a leadership team that could work cohesively and make recommendations to me. It seems so natural now, but back then I was working with my leadership team one-on-one. So I would have one-on-ones with each of them, and we would meet as a full company. And it was very rare that this group met regularly. It was only because of a project or some initiative that we had to collectively connect. So this whole idea of like now, and I don't know why it sounds so even silly now when I say it. I was like, why did we not do that? How did we not meet as a leadership team, and how did we not like create that cohesion? So that was the beginning of it. I think knowing that we were at a stage of growth that needed some change, bringing for me to step back and have the leadership team do the work and make recommendations to me. So I wasn't always like, sort of meddling in everything all the time. Like I was like, oh, what about this finance thing? Maybe I can do this. And I have, we use the Enneagram as well at MicroMentor, and I'm a 2, which is a helper. So I think I'm being helpful, but I really am not. It's better if I could step back and really allowing the leadership team to gel and become a cohesive unit, so that they as leaders are able to bring forward some things to us. And those pieces were super helpful. I know that you identified, Jessica, as we were working together, that it would be really helpful for me to meet separately with Glynis on roles and responsibilities. And that was also another light bulb eye opener session for me to see, okay, well, you have to bring the right people into the right roles. And I'm sure I can share more in the other findings, so I'll pass it back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So I'm keen to get us into our interactive portion for today. So Ellie, over to you.
Great, thank you. And wonderful to hear from you on clarity, Cecilia and Anita. So we're now going to invite you to bring to mind that ambition or challenge that you thought of at the start of the session. And I'm going to ask you some coaching questions to unlock your thinking around it across these three areas. So I'll pose a question, and then you'll have 1 minute to reflect and make your notes, and then we'll move on to the next question. So let's get going with the first question. Imagine it's a year from now and your ambition has been achieved or your challenge resolved. What's happening? And from that position a year ahead, look back and see what happened. What did you do? See if you can identify 3 key steps that you took to get there. Okay, so that's your 2nd minute up. And we'll move on to Cohesion now and come back to the coaching space after we've heard from Anita and Cecilia.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ellie. And I hope you all enjoyed taking those moments to start and think about actually a challenge or an ambition that you are thinking about now. So I'd like to come back to our second theme, so cohesion. And actually, perhaps, Anita, if I come to you first, because you just started to talk about actually how this process had started to build cohesion amongst your leadership team, and that you'd started to meet and do things differently in respect to that. So I'd love to hear a bit more about that, the idea of the theme of cohesion with respect to your work.
Yeah, when we started the coaching, Jessica, I don't know if you remember, we began not quite knowing exactly how we would structure this, but it turned into whoever was there in a leadership capacity at that time. When that's changed now, we've had about, half the people have turned over and we've changed to a new group, but that group decided to meet separately for sessions. And then you and I met for individual sessions. And that was sort of like the path that we were going in. What that allowed is for, I think, that the group to just surface, be a little bit more like open, surface things that were coming up for them and gelling as a leadership team. But what it helped is for me to clarify my role, so that I could be a cohesive part of that unit and a useful part of that unit, and play my role where I can be the person asking the critical questions, making sure that we're staying on course with MicroMentor's strategic direction, which was sort of like evolving, and we were trying to pull all those pieces together. But it was really important to do that. But at the same time, I think it was also important to signal to the rest of the organization, which was kind of growing and everyone was in different places, to demonstrate that cohesion, that we are coming together. Because sometimes, there were times when somebody would be in a meeting and say something, and then they would be like, well, I don't know, I heard this other thing here. And so it was really good to both genuinely have the cohesion within the team, but also demonstrate that to the rest of the organization. And I'll say from where I sat as we went through the process, and as sort of my mentor was an important part of like sort of the other side of the coaching, working with me to look at my, how to show up in times of crises as a leader, and how important it was to put people front and center. So keeping all of those in mind, it was helpful for me to look at who were the kind of people necessary to be in leadership roles. I don't think I was even in a place to see that until I saw them functioning as a unit. And that gave a little bit more information around what do you need for cohesion? What are the right ingredients, the skill levels that are needed to be a leader in that capacity, to be able to look ahead. And so make some actually important decisions about who stays in the leadership team, who needs to, what gaps we had, potentially what transitions we needed to plan for. So that today, now fast forward to today, we have a leadership team, not fast forward, it was, it's slow, everything happens very slowly, but I'm so incredibly proud of this leadership group that has formed. Each person has stepped in with, with the same sort of commitment and passion that everybody does at MicroMentor. But it feels like this well-oiled machine that's sort of working together, challenging each other. We did the skills coaching with the sessions with you, Ellie, and the things I remember is, sort of challenging each other, but listening to understand and holding sort of respectful positions, and sort of think about, ask the questions, right? Like you ask the questions about what am I not seeing, or how would I, how would I step into this with a little bit more open mind? So we ask each other those questions, but do that sort of respectfully without creating a lot of friction. And so it's everybody at MicroMentor, it's a full love fest. We all love each other, but it is important that when we come together, that we're able to do that as well. Like cohesion involves being able to stay in those positions, ask tough questions, hold our ground, and then collectively disagree. Or sort of, what do they say, that constructively disagree with each other and align towards a larger mission, even if we may not do it the exact same way. Yes. So there's really nuances that have opened up, which seem more clear now, I would say, than when we were in the midst of doing it. So it's sort of these muscles that develop over time, and as long as we continue practicing them, I guess.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm kind of here, what I think I'm hearing actually is how the coaching that people were receiving was translating into how they were then behaving with colleagues and with team members, and adopting that kind of coaching style in their interactions. Thank you. So Cecilia,
in the beginning, I noticed like we would actually stop and say, wait, what was that thing again? I'm going to ask the question. And now it's become a little.
How should we ask this question? Yes. Brilliant, thank you. Cecilia, how about your perspective on cohesion? What would you like to kind of share around this?
I think something that Anita just said, actually, with I think that to really achieve true cohesion, you have to identify your gaps. And I think that that's something that we continue to do as well. But it is about, the coaching sort of helped realize what some of those gaps were in our own leadership team as well. We've since brought on a rock star director of finance who has really helped, get us in line in terms of our processes and our finances. And it was needed. We knew it, but sort of coaching helps you realize I guess, the prioritization of certain things that are on your plate and sort of the urgency of certain things versus others. And I think that that has a lot to do with cohesion, actually, because if you're all on the same page and working to get on the same page, and we're not always on the same page, and we're still working on that, but I think if you're continuously working towards that, I think that that's actually what's important. Because everyone does have different experiences and everyone has different lived, well, again, experiences as well. And I think it's part of cohesion is part of is recognizing that as well, and that it's all actually valid. But as an organization, we just need to figure out which pieces to move forward with together. And I think that the coaching, and again, we continue to implement some of the learnings from the coaching, and we will be tackling some of these challenges in the coaching in the coming months that we'll be engaging with as well as a team, because we continue to face sort of some cohesion challenges that have that are externally not to get into details, but that are just externally imposed, right? So we all tend to work in ecosystems that are relatively volatile, and we need to be ready for that. And our teams have to be, I think something that we've realized is, and this has to do with cohesion as well, is that having a plan A, B, and C is always important. And having really these risk mitigation strategies really, really helps with cohesion, because it helps the team realize that the leadership team is there for them, is not going to let them flail, and is committed to implementing, the impact plan that we had co-created from the beginning, even though we might be facing continuous challenges just because of the contexts in which we operate, or the ecosystems in which we operate. And so I think that that actually has a lot to do with cohesion, is knowing one another has their back. And we don't actually have to all be friends, but we do have to have each other's back. And I think that that's sort of a big part of what coaching has shown, and something that we have, as a leadership team, have tried to demonstrate, and I think have very successfully demonstrated to our team, and something that we will continue to work on, because it's also not just the team, it's your final user as well, right? So really demonstrating to them that you are there. And I think, Anita, you spoke about that too, just having this real urgency to serve the needs of the entrepreneurs that were continuously shutting their doors. And that's going to continue to happen. And it might not be COVID, but it's, again, a wide variety of different challenges that they're facing, and that they have always faced, as things are just becoming more acute at this point in time. And I think I think coaching really helps in that, because also sort of going full circle, because it helps with determine your clarity. And without clarity, you can't really have the cohesion either. So I think it's like this sort of virtuous, well, that's actually an infinity symbol. It's a sort of a virtuous loop. We can use the infinity symbol too, if we would like, but
excellent.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, really, really interesting actually, and the interaction between the clarity and the cohesion, and of course then the flow out to the entrepreneurs, to your clients whom you're serving. Okay, so back to Ellie for a moment of reflection.
Great, and really, really interesting to hear from both of you around that. But let's move back now to your own ambition or challenge. So thinking about, you're still standing in the future, a year ahead. Bring to mind the key stakeholders who you've engaged with on the journey. And how did you engage these stakeholders and bring them along with you? Okay, let's move on to confidence then.
Great, thank you. So, Cecilia, let's come back to you. And so you've actually articulated beautifully the kind of the clarity and the cohesion piece, and I'd love to hear a little about then taking that on into the confidence component.
Sure. And first, just thank you, Ellie, for the questions. I've also been reflecting on them as you've been asking them, even though I knew you were going to ask them, but it's sort of helpful to sort of be, again, in the spot where you're given the space, even though it's a minute or two, but you're given the space to actually reflect on it. So just thank you very quickly. So this one's a bit harder for me, to be very honest, confidence, because I actually don't lack confidence, to be very honest. And that's mostly because I'm not afraid of messing up. I know that it's just part of the job, and it's part of the ecosystem, and sort of in true entrepreneurial form, I know it's coming. So that doesn't scare me, and it doesn't, and therefore I think confidence has not been a huge issue for me. However, I do think that what in terms of confidence, what coaching has helped me do is reflect on how I can sort of elevate the confidence levels of the team. And particularly in the Latin American context, structures tend to be very hierarchical. Teams don't tend to be given the space to ideate, to make their own decisions, to lead. It tends to be pretty sort of micromanagey. And I'm obviously speaking in blanket terms, but it just tends to be more that way. I have zero interest in that kind of structure. And so I think in terms of confidence, it's more about how can I, as a leader, sort of help the team gain the confidence that they need to develop professionally, to take the reins, and to try things without being scared of the repercussions. And again, we're still in this process, but I do believe, and I've just had I have a quarterly check-in individually with every single team member, and I've just had these check-ins. And from my observation, it's very clear the change that has happened in the last 6 to 9 months, very clear. And then just I think along with confidence comes transparency and communication. And I think that those are two things that coaching not only helps with, because you have to be very transparent and communicative with your coach. Otherwise, what's the point of actually engaging in the conversation? But then it also helps you sort of translate that to your team. And for any of those of you who actually know me, I'm quite honest. I will let everything bear. No worries about that one. But it is more difficult to sort of help other people sort of determine what confidence means to them and how they can actually exhibit it. Because also you don't want to impose your definition of confidence on them. So that sort of, I think coaching helps. And again, we haven't really like dug deep into this yet. It will be coming, Glennis, hint, hint. These will be some of the focus points I'd like to work on. But I think that that's of utmost importance, is how anything that you do in a coaching session can translate to the benefit of your team and ultimately to the benefit of the work that you are doing, particularly as we all work in the impact space.
Great, thank you. And Anita, how about you in terms of the confidence theme? You're on mute at the moment.
Confidence just definitely was a theme that emerged. It's interesting because I think in general, people, when they meet me and see me, would see me as a very confident person, which I am. But there are moments when that gets shaken, and during that time of that shift and the transition, it felt, the questions I was asking myself, once again, now when I look back 2 years later, it all makes so much sense. But back then I was like, well, I wonder, why do they want to meet as a group? What am I doing wrong? Why am I not involved in those conversations? Maybe I'm not, doing these things correctly. Am I ready to be stepping into this new role, to be leading from this place? And it was, it's more the stressed state reaction that prompts this sort of lack of confidence. And what it has done now is, it doesn't mean that I don't have moments when I think about that, but I've noticed it's the noticing of it. It's like I notice when I question myself to say whether, can I do this? It's really, there's something else underlying, and I have to step back and sort of observe to see what's happening. Will I know all the answers, and can I do something perfectly? 100% not, but am I willing to be in the ring to do it? Yes. And so that really was the main piece of confidence that I had to take away, is that there is no magical somebody else who is going to know these answers better than I do. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I have what I need to be able to be faced with a challenge and be supporting the team. So that was, I would say, one piece. Cecilia, you hit the nail on the head there. It was about also me sitting in my own confidence meant that I could freely allow other people in the team to step into their own roles, rather than them feeling like they had to either seek my permission, or like I had to make the decision ultimately, or that in their own roles that they had full authority. They have accountability for the results, but they also have the authority to be able to do it, which I think that together, because previously they had accountability, but maybe they were lacking the authority. So then it's the constant cycle of questioning. Well, I have to do this, and but it's sort of like fear driven rather than confidence driven, and it is it builds confidence in the whole team. Everybody feels like they know clearly what they're doing, why they're doing this, how decisions are made, and we've started communicating clearly that the leadership team is going to make this decision. Anita is going to make this decision. This process is going to be completely inclusive, and we're all going to be participating in it. And if the leadership team is making a decision, it's going to be an inclusive process in this way. And so that's really sort of like defined how decision making is made. And when new things have come up, it's interesting. The biggest lesson for me was step back and see what people are coming to you with, in terms of recommendations and and conversations. And finally, it's about accepting failure. We have made it such a big part of our culture to say that when we are working for a breakthrough, which is like reaching millions of entrepreneurs with access to mentoring in a way that has never been done before, breakdowns will happen. And if that's the nature of this business, then I don't have to feel like I have to step back each moment to say, reevaluate who I am, or what kind of leadership style I have, or what sort of leadership role I play. And it's sort of like all the coaching elements were peppered through various pieces of this that has, I think, sort of brought us here.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. So And actually what I'm starting to hear there, Anita, is that actually how the coaching questions that we might have been working with through the coaching, you actually after the fact are then continuing to ask yourself those questions as you go through making decisions and onwards. Okay, so back over to Ellie for our final moment to reflect.
Great, thank you both. Some really wonderful insights from you both there. And we are heading back to your ambitional challenge for the final time in this session. So bringing your thinking back to current day, what are the 3 key steps that you need to take now to realize your 1-year vision? So what are you committing to, and when will you do it? So take a final 30 seconds or so to reflect on your ambitional challenge and just see what you notice. How do you feel about that situation now? So you've had around 6 minutes or so to think about your ambitional challenge. What's changed in how you see it? And you are welcome to share your reflections with each other in the chat. We'd love to see them.
So now let's just start to wrap our session. It has been absolutely lovely to be speaking with you, Cecilia and Anita, and thank you, Ellie, for taking us through the exercise. So actually, now that we've heard your perspectives, so much of those is echoed in what I'm actually going to just step us through now. But what I wanted to share with you was a perspective from our funder, Nicholas Koloff, Executive Director at Argidius Foundation, which he shared with me in his evaluation interview. So Nicholas reported that he'd seen better functioning management teams, and we've heard about that today, clearer roles and stronger ability for team members to fulfill those roles alongside a better sense of prioritization. And he said that he'd also noticed that partners had recognized the value of coaching and that this could potentially be beneficial for their entrepreneurs as well. So perhaps how do they incorporate these approaches to listen better to their clients? And overall, Argidius are seeing more active, cost-effective and impactful enterprise support organizations, which are delivering impact for the enterprises they serve in terms of revenue and employment generation, alongside their own ability to raise capital. So what Argidius is starting to see is progress towards more impactful organisations, yes, but also that the enterprise support organisations they work with are more sustainable, with the aim that when other funders look at them, they are robust, their partners are well managed, and they're, of course, doing effective and impactful work. So just an echo from the external perspective and what we've also already heard from Cecilia and Anita. So we very much hope that you enjoyed the session today, hearing from Anita and Cecilia and experiencing your own coaching moments as well. If you have any questions, then please feel free to post them in the chat or using the Q&A, and we'll respond to them individually. And I would like to extend a huge thank you to Cecilia and Anita for joining us today, sharing your perspectives on the coaching and how it supported you to navigate change. And for more insights, check out our podcast series, which includes a full interview with Cecilia and Anita and 4 other interviews with enterprise support organisations. And the interview with Nicholas is a must for investors and funders. And if you'd like to hear more about our work or about Cecilia and Anita's work, then please just private message us your email address and we can be in touch with you. And go to our website to visit the Coaching Impact page, and you can hear all of the conversations, and there are links to Agora Partnerships and MicroMentor there as well. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Cecilia, Anita and Ellie. Goodbye.